The rain hammered against the windows of Sunshine Animal Shelter with the kind of persistence that made everyone inside feel cozy and grateful to be dry. Sarah Martinez, the shelter director, was reviewing adoption paperwork when she heard the front door chime over the storm's symphony. She looked up to see an elderly man standing in the entrance, water dripping from his worn jacket, his shoulders shaking, not from the cold, but from quiet sobs. "Sir, are you all right?" Sarah approached him gently, her voice carrying the same warmth she used with frightened animals. The man looked up, revealing kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, now fogged from the transition between the cold, rain, and warm shelter. His silver hair was plastered to his head, and his weathered hands trembled as he tried to speak. "I'm sorry," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go. I need to surrender my dog." Sarah's heart sank. After 15 years running the shelter, she'd seen this scene too many times. People forced to give up beloved pets due to circumstances beyond their control. She guided him to a quiet corner with comfortable chairs, away from the lobby's bustle. "What's your name?" she asked softly, offering him a box of tissues. "Harold. Harold Fitzgerald." He accepted the tissues gratefully. "And this is about my Charlie." His voice cracked on the name. "He's a golden retriever, 12 years old. We've been together since he was 8 weeks old." Sarah settled into the chair across from him. "Tell me about Charlie, Harold." Harold's eyes brightened despite his tears. "Oh, Charlie. He's the gentlest soul you've ever met. Loves everyone, especially children. He used to visit the elementary school with me when I volunteered there, before my arthritis got too bad." He paused, collecting himself. "After my wife Margaret passed 2 years ago, Charlie became everything to me. But now—" "What's changed?" Sarah asked gently. "I had a fall last week, broke my hip. The doctors say I'll need months of physical therapy, and I'm moving to assisted living next week. They don't allow pets." The words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would make them hurt less. "I have no family left, no one who can take him. Charlie deserves better than being stuck in a small apartment with an old man who can barely take care of himself." Sarah studied Harold's face, seeing not just sadness but deep love and sacrifice. "Harold, would you like to meet some of our volunteers? Maybe we can figure out another solution." Before Harold could respond, a commotion erupted from the dog play area. A group of teenagers from the local high school's community service program had arrived for their weekly volunteer session, and their excited chatter filled the shelter with youthful energy. "Sarah!" called out Emma Chen, a 17-year-old with paint-stained fingers and an infectious smile. "We brought the banner we made for the adoption event next weekend." She held up a colorful sign reading, "Forever Homes Await," in bright, cheerful letters. Behind Emma came her boyfriend Marcus, carrying art supplies, followed by twins, Riley and Alex Thompson, and bringing up the rear was Jamie Rodriguez, who immediately gravitated toward the kennels where several dogs had begun, barking excitedly at the familiar voices. "Kids, I'd like you to meet Harold," Sarah said, making quick introductions. "He's facing a difficult situation with his dog Charlie." The teenager's expressions immediately shifted from excitement to concern. Emma, who had a gift for reading people, knelt beside Harold's chair. "What's Charlie like?" she asked, her voice gentle. Harold's face transformed as he began describing his beloved companion. "He knows when I'm sad, comes right over and puts his head on my lap. He brings me his tennis ball every morning at exactly 7:30 because that's when we used to play fetch in the backyard. And he howls along when I play my harmonica, though I'm not sure you'd call what he does singing." The teenagers exchanged glances, and Sarah could practically see the wheels turning in their minds. "Mr. Fitzgerald," Marcus said thoughtfully, "what if Charlie didn't have to live in the assisted living facility? What if he could visit you there?" "Yeah," Riley chimed in. "My grandmother's place allows therapy dogs to visit. Maybe we could register Charlie as your emotional support animal for visits." Harold looked confused. "I don't understand. Where would he live?" Alex, who had been quietly thinking, suddenly sat up straighter. "What if he lived with one of us? Well, not exactly with us, but what if we created a kind of shared custody situation?" Sarah felt a spark of excitement. In all her years at the shelter, she'd never seen teenagers problem solve like this for a complete stranger. "What do you mean?" Harold asked. Emma's eyes lit up. "My family has been wanting a dog, but my parents work long hours. What if Charlie stayed at my house during the week and we brought him to visit you every day after school? And weekends he could stay with my family," Jamie added enthusiastically. "We have a huge backyard and my little sister has been begging for a dog." Wait, Harold said, overwhelmed. "You don't even know me. Why would you do this?" The teenagers fell silent for a moment. Finally, Riley spoke up. "My grandpa died last year. He had to give up his cat Whiskers when he moved to the care facility. It broke his heart, and Whiskers never adjusted to the shelter. She passed away 3 months later, and Grandpa blamed himself until the day he died." Her voice was thick with emotion. "Maybe we can't help my grandpa anymore, but we can help you and Charlie." Harold's tears returned, but these seemed different. Not tears of despair, but of disbelief and hope. "But this is too much to ask of you children," he protested weakly. "You're not asking," Marcus pointed out with a grin. "We're offering. There's a difference." Sarah felt her own eyes misting over. "Harold, what if we made this official? We could set up a foster network with the kids' families, with you as Charlie's primary owner. You'd still be his dad, but he'd have multiple homes where he's loved and cared for." Over the next hour, the group worked out the details. Emma would take Charlie Monday through Wednesday, Jamie would have him Thursday through Saturday, and Alex and Riley's family would cover Sundays. Every day, whoever had Charlie would bring him to visit Harold at the assisted living facility during their evening walk. "But I need to meet Charlie first," Emma said practically. "What if we don't get along?" Harold's face broke into his first real smile of the day. "Oh, you'll love him, but more importantly, he'll love you. Charlie has never met a person he didn't like." "Can we go get him now?" Jamie asked eagerly. Harold hesitated. "He's at home, but I don't have a car anymore." "Road trip," the teenagers declared in unison. An hour later, a convoy of cars pulled up to Harold's modest bungalow. The house was small but immaculately kept, with a garden that showed evidence of loving care despite the season's dormancy. Harold led them up the front walk, his keys shaking slightly in his hands. The moment the door opened, a beautiful golden retriever came bounding out, tail wagging so hard his entire body wiggled. Charlie had graying fur around his muzzle and moved a bit stiffly, but his joy was unmistakable as he greeted Harold with gentle kisses and then immediately turned his attention to the newcomers. "Oh my gosh," Emma breathed, dropping to her knees as Charlie approached her with cautious curiosity. "He's perfect." Charlie sniffed each teenager carefully, his tail never stopping its enthusiastic wagging. When he reached Jamie, he sat down and offered his paw, which Jamie shook solemnly. "I think he approves." Sarah laughed. Inside the house, Harold showed them Charlie's favorite toys, his feeding schedule, and the corner where his bed sat, though Harold admitted Charlie usually slept on the couch or sometimes, against all rules, on the foot of Harold's bed. "He loves car rides," Harold explained, watching as Marcus scratched behind Charlie's ears. "And he knows the way to the park, the library, and the ice cream shop. Sometimes I think he's smarter than I am." As they prepared to leave, Harold knelt down beside Charlie, his arthritic joints protesting. "Charlie boy, we're going to try something new. These young people want to help us, and I think it might be wonderful. But you'll still be my dog, okay? Always." Charlie seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. He pressed his head against Harold's chest and stayed perfectly still, as if offering comfort. The next week flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Emma's parents, initially surprised by their daughter's commitment, quickly fell in love with Charlie. Emma's mother, a nurse who worked long shifts, found herself looking forward to coming home to Charlie's enthusiastic greetings. Her father, a reserved accountant, was caught on multiple occasions having serious conversations with the dog about his day. "I think Charlie might be a better listener than some of my human friends," Emma confided to Sarah during one of their daily check-ins. The visits to Harold's assisted living facility became the highlight of everyone's day. The staff initially worried about having a dog in the building, but Charlie's gentle nature and impeccable behavior quickly won them over. More importantly, other residents began to look forward to Charlie's visits too. Mrs. Patterson, who had barely spoken since moving in 6 months earlier, began waiting in the lobby every afternoon at 4 o'clock, clutching dog treats she'd convinced her daughter to bring. Mr. Kim, a former veterinarian with advancing dementia, would suddenly become lucid and animated when Charlie was around, sharing stories about dogs he'd treated decades earlier. But the most dramatic change was in Harold himself. The broken man who had entered the shelter crying was replaced by someone who had found new purpose. He began leading informal dog therapy sessions, sharing Charlie with other residents who missed their own pets. He started a journal documenting Charlie's adventures with his new extended family, complete with photos the teenagers took and printed for him. "You know," Harold told Sarah during one of her visits, "I thought giving up Charlie meant I was losing everything I had left. Instead, I've gained 5 new grandchildren." The teenagers had indeed become like family to Harold. They called him Grandpa Harold, sought his advice about school and relationships, and included him in their group text message chain, sending him dozens of photos and videos of Charlie's daily adventures. 3 months into their arrangement, the first real test came. Emma came down with the flu during her week with Charlie, and her parents were traveling for work. The carefully planned schedule was disrupted. Harold, despite his mobility limitations, immediately called Jamie. "Don't worry about the schedule," he said. "Family adapts." Within an hour, all 5 teenagers had converged on Emma's house. They took turns caring for both Emma and Charlie, bringing soup, walking the dog, and keeping their friend company. Harold, unable to physically help, but determined to contribute, arranged for food delivery to the house and called Emma's parents to update them. "This is what family does," he told Emma over the phone. "We take care of each other." The success of Harold and Charlie's story began to spread throughout the community. Sarah received calls from other elderly pet owners facing similar situations and from families interested in fostering. The teenagers, inspired by the difference they'd made, started a program at their high school called Golden Years, Golden Hearts, pairing students with seniors who needed companionship. 6 months after that rainy day when Harold had entered the shelter crying, Sarah organized a celebration at the community center. 3 generations gathered to honor the unconventional family that had formed around one old man and his dog. Harold, looking healthier and happier than anyone had seen him in years, stood to address the crowd. Charlie sat beside him, wearing a bow tie for the occasion, his tail thumping against the floor. "When I walked into that shelter," Harold began, his voice strong and clear, "I thought I was giving up my family. I thought Charlie and I were saying goodbye forever." He paused, looking around the room at the teenagers who had become his grandchildren, their parents who had become his friends, and the shelter staff who had become his extended family. "Instead, I learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage or adoption papers. Sometimes, family is about choosing to love each other. Sometimes, it's about a group of teenagers who see an old man crying and decide to do something about it. Sometimes it's about a dog who teaches us that love multiplies when it's shared." Charlie, as if understanding the moment's significance, stood and placed his paw on Harold's leg. "I came to the shelter to surrender my dog," Harold continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Instead, I surrendered my loneliness. I surrendered my belief that I had nothing left to offer the world. I surrendered my fear of being a burden." The room was silent except for the sound of tissues being pulled from boxes. In return, I received something I never expected. I received a new family. Not just for me, but for Charlie too. He doesn't just have one home now, he has 6. He doesn't just have one person who loves him, he has dozens. Emma stood up from her seat and walked over to Harold, wrapping him in a tight hug. One by one, the other teenagers joined her, creating a group hug that somehow managed to include Charlie as well. "Thank you, Grandpa Harold," Emma said, "for teaching us that sometimes the best way to help yourself is to let other people help you." As the celebration continued around them, Harold reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. He thought about Margaret and how she would have loved these young people. He thought about the rain that had driven him to the shelter. That day, and how sometimes storms bring exactly what we need. Most of all, he thought about Charlie, who had been his companion through grief and loss, and was now his bridge to new joy and connection. The dog who had once been his everything was still his everything, but now everything was so much bigger and more beautiful than Harold had ever imagined possible. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Harold sat in his favorite chair at the assisted living facility. Charlie lay at his feet, tired but content after a day full of attention and treats. The teenagers had gone home to their families, but not before scheduling their usual visits for the week ahead. Harold picked up his harmonica, a gift from the teenagers for his 78th birthday, and began to play a gentle melody. Charlie, true to form, lifted his head and began to howl along, creating their own version of a duet. Down the hall, other residents smiled at the familiar sound. Mrs. Patterson marked another day on her calendar, looking forward to tomorrow's visit. Mr. Kim sat in his chair, lucid enough to remember the joy of the day, if not all the details. And in homes across town, 5 teenagers fell asleep with smiles on their faces, dreaming of their next adventure with Grandpa Harold and their shared dog, Charlie. Sarah, driving home from the celebration, thought about the magic she'd witnessed over the past 6 months. In her 15 years at the shelter, she'd seen thousands of happy endings, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. She'd never seen a surrender become an expansion, a goodbye become a hello, a ending become a beginning. She thought about Harold's words, "Sometimes family is about choosing to love each other," and she realized that while she'd always known the shelter was about finding homes for animals, maybe it was also about something more. Maybe it was about creating family, building connections, and proving that love really does multiply when it's shared. The next morning, Harold woke up in his small apartment, but he didn't feel small or alone. Charlie was spending the night with Jamie's family, but Harold could picture exactly what the dog was doing, probably sleeping on the forbidden couch, dreaming of tennis balls and treats and all the people who loved him. Harold reached for his phone and found 17 new messages in the group chat. Pictures of Charlie playing with Jamie's little sister, a video of him helping with homework by putting his head on a textbook, and a series of good morning messages from his 5 surrogate grandchildren. He typed back, "Good morning, my dear family. What adventure shall we have today?" The responses came back immediately, full of plans and enthusiasm and love. Harold smiled, put on his jacket, and prepared to start another day surrounded by the family he'd never expected to find. As he walked toward the lobby to wait for Emma and Charlie's morning visit, Harold passed the mirror in the hallway. The man looking back at him bore little resemblance to the broken, crying man who had entered the animal shelter 6 months earlier. This man had purpose, joy, and above all, hope. Sometimes, Harold reflected, the most beautiful stories begin with tears, but they don't have to end there. The automatic doors of the assisted living facility whooshed open, and Harold could hear the familiar sound of Charlie's excited barking from the parking lot. Emma was running toward the building, Charlie's leash in one hand and a cup of coffee for Harold in the other, her backpack bouncing as she hurried to start another day of their shared adventure. Harold stepped outside to meet them, his heart full of gratitude for the storm that had brought them all together, and for the love that had grown from one old man's tears into something beautiful enough to change an entire community. After all, he thought, as Charlie launched himself into Harold's arms with gentle enthusiasm, the best families are the ones we choose, and sometimes they choose us right back.